What I thought would take a year took 8. So I've always been a car guy. I mean, high school, college, all that stuff, always buying and wanting a car. I had a Mustang when I was in high school, a 66 Mustang. When I got into college, I got into British cars. I figured, okay, I need to learn about British cars. So I bought a Sunbeam, and I then was into Porsches. I always loved Porsches. So I managed to cobble couldn't afford a 911, like a really nice one. So I bought a rusty 72 911 just so I could take it to the track. So I did all that stuff. So I was going to art school in Brooklyn, Pratt, got a job in television. So crazy is that next thing you know, I'm working and going to school and working at CBS television as like a support tech. And because I had a photography degree, I started to learn how to do camera. So as a eager kid working on morning news that nobody wanted to work on, I started, next thing you know, I had a job in television. Still all the while doing cars. Like all my money would just go to cars. Try to do stuff with buying or working and fixing on it. Letterman decides he's going to come to CBS. I'm already working at CBS. I was working audio. I was doing camera. And everybody's putting their hat in the name of working for Letterman. So I threw my name in the pile. When Letterman came to CBS, I got on the crew. So I didn't do camera. I did audio. So I worked on Letterman and I did audio in, 93 when he came. Letterman's a car guy, so we'd always talk cars, and everybody used to roll their eyes as like car talk, and they used to call me Tommy. It's like Tommy and Dave talking cars, and all the downtime. So we'd be talking about cars and everything. So it's kind of convoluted in the way it goes. Is that I started working for Letterman. A friend of mine in the Porsche world knew this guy, Francois. Francois was a guru of vintage Ferrari in Connecticut. He worked for people like Ralph Lauren, all the Ferrari people in the 80s. Francois started with Kennedy Motors in New York, so a lot of history, and also as a chief mechanic for North American Racing Team, NART. A mutual friend of Francois and I said, you should meet because you work for Letterman. I heard Francois just started working for Letterman because Letterman's got a couple Ferraris and that Francois is working on them. So I said, yeah, sure, let's go see a shop. So I go to Francois' shop. I know nothing about Ferraris. I'm introduced to him. Hi, I work for Dave on his TV show. Francois is working on Dave's 212. He had a Ghia body 212. And so we started chatting, and I'm looking at these cars, and it's just blown away. They're beautiful. I mean, I remember they had this 250 short wheelbase in the shop, and it was covered. I remember him lifting the cover, and it was like as if he was lifting a skirt because it was just this body that was underneath this like hip, and I just was, okay, whatever I think is really cool about Porsches, something's going on here with Ferraris that I need to learn everything about it. And it started there where I was always bugging Francois, can I come by? Can I see what you're doing? What are you doing this week? Can I stop by? And so one day Francois was just like, if you really want one of these things, people take these things apart all the time. And then they sit and they don't know how to put it back together. You can find one and I can show you how to put it back together. Really? So, because I didn't think I could afford, one that was done. So, of course, scouring back then, the Bible was Hemmings Motors News. So you had to look at that. You had to look at the Sunday Times. You didn't have the internet. So when I started that search, it was probably 98, 99, and I found a car. When I bought my 330 America, it was disassembled. So a guy bought it out of Chicago in like 1976, brought it back to Roanoke, and then just started to take it all apart. And he had a friend, like a shade tree mechanic, said he was going to paint it. So they left the rear window in, and then they took the engine out, interior out, and then they painted it. They painted a Corsa Rossa. The original color on this car was Amaranto, which is darker red, but like an oxblood red, but they painted it Corsa Rossa, the bright Ferrari red, which I'm not crazy about, but it is what it is. So when I bought it, it had just been painted. The guy was 72 years old, and he said, I'm never going to remember how to put this car back together. So he put it in Hemmings. So when I bought it, I wasn't going to take the paint off because it was shiny, it was two-stage. Ferraris, the worst thing you can do is take the paint off because what's underneath that paint is never going to be cheap. And whether you get charged Ferrari tax because you're painting it and it's a Ferrari and they're going to just charge you more because it's a Ferrari, or the simple fact of the matter is there are very few body shops that actually do really good work. no offense to these people, but like the one person says this is a great body work, and it's just a ton of filler. You don't know until once the paint's applied, it hides all amount of sin. So I didn't want to even take the paint off of my own car. I was just going to put it back together because the idea was like, it was only going to take me a year. I was just going to slap everything back on it and then be driving the car. But as I was putting it together, because I was at Francois' shop, Francois was in the 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s. He was a high-end, concours level restorer. When we took the car apart or took the suspension pieces out and stripped all the junk off of it, they're nickel plated. Send them out to nickel plate because that's the plating. So I did everything correctly, like all the plating, like if it didn't need to be chrome plated, nickel plated, cad plated, when you take it off, you send it out and get it done. So I put it together correctly. The only things I didn't do were things that just were too expensive for my budget. I didn't redo the bumpers. Today, if I had to do bumpers, $4,000. Back then, it could have even been $1,000 or $2,000. I just leave the bumpers the way they are. I mean, I'm on a budget. When I was working for Letterman, I would get Fridays off. So I started calling it my Ferrari Friday. It was like I work Monday through Thursday. We would double tape on a Thursday. I would take Friday off, and work a full week in 4 days. And then my day was Friday. That way, I think like when you put a car together in pieces that has, let's say 1,000 hours to put together, the only way to do it is to do it, consistently. So I realized that every Friday I would go work on this car. I wouldn't be expected to go do the shopping or have to do the dry cleaning or have to clean the house and all this. So that's how I did it. What I thought would take a year took 8. So in that process and working for Letterman during the week and then working on this car, I kind of went through this transition, which was just like watching what Francois did for a living. He's by himself. He's his little workshop. He works on specific cars. It doesn't work on newer cars. And I was learning a lot from him. And every week I'd go up and it says, okay, today, in his French accent, today you take this apart and this is how you put it together. And I would just follow his direction. And then when I get stuck, he would come over and help me. And I learned how to do this car. So I felt like I was serving an apprenticeship with my car. I loved what I did at television. I mean, it was look, it was one of the most fun show to work on. And I was on the audio crew, so I worked with all the bands. I set up bands. I was in rock and roll. I was, and I was doing production. So it was an exciting job, but I like Ferraris more. I found myself while I was at work, I'd be on the phone ordering parts. I'd be talking to people, all this stuff. All the while, I should be doing television. I made the decision that if I could figure out a way to do it, I would do this for a living. When I started doing this car, there was this thing called the World Wide Web. And I really wanted to learn how to. My degree is in photography. At that time, it wasn't so much video driven, it was pictures. The websites were pictures and story. Well, I can write and I take pictures. And I was working on a car where I could actually write about it every week about what I was doing. So the craziest story is my nephew wrote the script for blogging because there was no blogging software. This is before WordPress. So we wrote this script so that I could upload pictures and story to a website. That website drew in a lot of people in the world that knew vintage Ferrari because, there's a million pictures of Ferraris on the internet, but not many websites that show you how to pull a gearbox out of one. And so there was interest in there. A couple media outlets picked it up. And now I'd go to Francois' shop and I'd have people contacting me through the website and they're like, hey, I see what you're doing at Francois' shop. I've been trying to find him because he doesn't advertise. And I have this, Ferrari, vintage Ferrari, and I'd like to know so I'd go to work and I'd say, hey, Francois, would you take on a job for a guy with a 330 GTC? He goes, yeah, why? He goes, well, it needs this. How do you know? Well, I met him on this guy on the internet says he wants to come in. And I was almost like I was vetting these guys for Francois. Because they knew who he was, they were willing to pay what he paid, and they knew what it was about. So all of a sudden I realized my website was my marketing tool to a business. I then became Francois, kind of a gatekeeper to Francois because Francois doesn't advertise, but I'd get people to come in. I'd decide, is this the right fit? Is this guy good? What does he do? I'd find out what he did and not what he did, but just try to feel him out. Was he the right fit for Francois? And that's another key of it, which was that another way that I could make a living at it? Because that's the marketing, like free marketing. I didn't have to advertise anywhere. And then the other side of it was it was rewarding. I mean, if you just worked on these cars, a skill set that I was learning every day, I was collating all this data from website and everything else of people. And if I could downsize my life to live in the country where it wasn't trying to keep up with bills of living in Manhattan, I could actually make a go at it. When I finally put the car together, things happened in my life that were able to change where I went and quit. My business today, if I had to describe it, is I'm a restoration slash repair shop for vintage Ferrari. If it has a carburetor on it, I work on it. So it really deals with pre-72 vintage Ferrari, and really Ferrari only. My personal collection, I have other things besides Ferraris that I could work on all sorts of stuff, but I like to work on what I know, and I don't like feeling like the customer's paying me to learn how to work on their Lancia. You know, I could probably figure it out, but if I have X amount of billable a week, I'd rather bill for something that I know and I know how to fix and I know where to get the parts and I can get your car back to you. And I'm only one person. So if you're paying my hourly rate, I'm the guy who's actually touching the car. So today, 22 years later, I still own the car. I paid $30,000 for it. It was all the money. I mean, I said this before, I could have bought a running driving car for $40,000 back then, and I could have had a vintage Ferrari. I didn't have $40,000. I had $30,000, and I borrowed half of that to pay for that car. But I managed to do it. Today, it's worth wholesale value probably $350,000, probably $400,000. You know, but because my car is kind of a celebrity, or at least everybody knows it, I certainly wouldn't try to sell it like that. But I definitely think I could get us definitely in the threes, mid threes to fours. But 330 Americas are funny because they're so rare that occasionally you'll see one sell for, you know, a Concours perfect one can be up as high as $500,000. Every car guy says, oh, I'm never selling the car. But I feel like I owe it to this car. Like, it is my rosebud. It changed my life. I can't just cut it loose. I mean, we've had many conversations at the family dinner table where it's just like, okay, a guy just called me today and he offered me X. And luckily, my wife and kid were just like, no, you don't have to sell the car. Okay, after a couple times of that, I think I realized, yeah, can't sell this car. I mean, I'd love to have another one or try to figure it out. But this car itself, I think I'm kind of stuck with it.
When you get a ticket, no matter where it happens, it's more important than ever to fight every one. And the perfect partner in that fight is the Ticket Clinic. When you get a ticket, you're facing costly insurance premium increases, points on your license, fines, risk of suspension, jail time, and they can help you avoid all of that. They've got offices in Florida and in California, but they can help you fight a ticket through their network of attorneys no matter where in the United States you get one. You can text a picture of your ticket to 305-305, or you can check them out now at the link in the description below. So thank them for their support of VINwiki, of CarTrek, and fight your ticket with the Ticket Clinic.